Hello everyone, I'm Vivi and welcome back. If there's one thing I was bummed about when playing Thieves in Time, it was the final boss fight with Surreal Le Paradox. All that build-up, playing as all the ancestors before, everyone trying to retrieve their canes, all of that, only to then be prompted with a bunch of button pressing. We're talking about a character who went out of their way to cause havoc to the Cooper timeline, stealing their canes, even altering the Thievius Raccoonus. When first playing this, I really thought this boss fight would be more. Not necessarily more complex, but more thorough. I had imagined the ancestors being involved, for example, or simply more involved mechanics we learned from playing the game. But this, just button sequences, yeah, it definitely, to me personally, felt really underwhelming. One honorable mention, if anything, I did like the sliding on rails part. This right here just goes to show how much bigger this boss fight could have been. With that said, here's something you didn't know about this boss fight. This right here could have been so much more, and we missed out. I'm not just saying this for the heck of it. Sanzaru's Matt Kramer had actually shared his own sentiment regarding this last segment in the game. For those who don't remember, Matt Kramer was lead designer on Sly Cooper Thieves in Time. The last time we really had an in-depth interview of him was during the revelation of Thieves in Time's Cut Egypt DLC. This was back in December 2019 with Kinda Funny Games. Where was I? As I was saying, remember this series of podcasts by Sly Cooper's official voice actor Kevin Miller and comedian Justin Worsham? They had tons of episodes recorded together. This series was called Second Funniest Podcast, but then rebranded as Gamerland Podcast. Episode 509, Part 2, we had Matt Kramer. This was recorded way back in 2013, and what he says during this episode really just makes you wonder. As I mentioned, Paradox's fight could have been so much more, and here's why. Right at the 39-minute mark of the episode, Kramer starts discussing the process of development a bit, especially for the end part of the game. A huge factor in making this decision, the whole final boss with Le Paradox, the whole button prompts, that was a simple matter of time and budget. He explained that the team had this debate going on, whether to have this big boss fight with Le Paradox or focus on the ancestors, prioritizing them. Due to pretty much time constraints and budget, they didn't have time to deliver both. They simply decided to just stick with one of these two options, that option being the ancestors. So again, Sanzaru had two options, A and B. A, having a bigger, more layered Le Paradox boss fight, or B, put more emphasis on the ancestors. They went with B because they believed that's what the essence of Thieves in Time is. It's the central focus and theme of the game. So in the end, what we have here, retrieving the canes and playing as the ancestors, that's what we got instead of a more detailed final boss. Kramer also admitted this during the podcast.
But I know some people don't like the button prompt sequence at the end with Le Paradox, which, I agree. I wish we could have done some more, but, it's time and money. And, as a developer, we don't like doing those. We'd rather have some big, elegant thing,
They admitted that as a developer, they don't like the whole button pressing mechanic. They instead would have preferred a more layered, driven boss fight. But as mentioned before, development constraints just didn't make that feasible. Alright, I keep mentioning these different options. They went with B, but what about A? More layered boss, we get that, but did Kramer say anything else regarding option A? He sure did.
At the end of the game, we had a big debate. Do we want to end the game and have this big Le Paradox boss fight where you use all the costumes again?
Yeah.
In this big layered boss battle, or do we want to bring back the ancestors? Because we didn't have time to do both.
Right. Yeah.
That's what the whole debate was about. Use all costumes for a final boss or prioritize a segment with the ancestors. Just looking at the whole layout of this boss, you just can't help but wonder where costumes would be utilized. Seeing as how this is all mid-air combat, I could just picture this boss requiring skill in good aiming, if using the archer costume, or heck, the Sabretooth costume, trying to land at the right spot at the right moment kind of thing. The Thief costume's ability to slow down time, we had that during Miss Decibel's boss fight, but a small little segment requiring us to slow down time here would have been cool too. If anything, we could have utilized the sword that comes with the Thief costume to break machinery to our advantage, dealing damage to Le Paradox at the same time. The Jailbird costume, I imagine, would have used to open a pathway for us. I'd imagine heavy debris landing in front of us. We could use the ball to push it out of the way, for example. Samurai's suit could have been used to avoid debris or projectiles, or simply deflecting attacks, sort of like El Jefe's boss fight, which still to this day remains top in this game. Using Samurai costume, by deflecting pretty much, you would deal damage to Le Paradox. These are just rough imagined ideas of how things would have turned out had they used all the costumes. I do have one question for you all. Could you have imagined all the ancestors helping Sly defeat Le Paradox? Call this option C. Sanzaru talked about option A and B. Either have costumes for the final boss or prioritize the ancestors. They took B, and that was this segment right here, retrieving all the canes, but what if they had prioritized the ancestors in a different way? Have some of them, if not all, the ancestors defeat Le Paradox with Sly. Could you imagine that? Final epic closing moment type of thing. If not all ancestors involved, perhaps some spots could have been reserved to Murray and Bentley. Bentley does some very much needed hacking, disadvantaging Le Paradox, and then Murray dealing with guards being summoned by Le Paradox. All in all, this final boss, as stated by Sanzaru, it could have been entirely different. With that being said, how would you have imagined the final boss? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section below. Like always, a massive thank you to my patrons for supporting the channel, and thank you all so much for watching. You can call me Vivi, and until next time.